In my last video, I said Line of Duty wasn't healthy for the mind, and this week's episode certainly proved me right with a friggin' standoff cliffhanger. Hi there mate, how's it going? It's Benja here, and this is a breakdown and review of Line of Duty Season 6, Episode 5. First of all, let's discuss Joanne Davidson's DNA results, shall we? As we predicted, she is related to the former OCG leader Tommy Hunter, but that is not all. Steve says there's an unusually high percentage match and run of homozygosity, meaning that Joe was born as a result of inbreeding. Samantha, Joe's mom, was Tommy's sister, and that evil bastard must have forced himself on Samantha, leading to Joe's conception. This is not a theory, it is confirmed because it is written out on a post-it note right here. Joe is Tommy's niece and daughter. Oof, I don't know what to say about that really. I mean, things are starting to get really dark, and that is saying something because the show was already quite dark before this reveal. We also learn that Samantha is dead, so the OCG can't be using her to blackmail Joe. They're probably threatening to expose her relation to Tommy. That's why Joe must be working for them. The next day, Kate locates 3 workshops where the gun that killed Gail Vella could have been made, and fearing that this information might get leaked, she tells everybody on the murder investigation team to hand in their phones, and she only tells them about one location. She also informs AC-12 of all 3 locations so that they can keep an eye on any unusual activities. Nothing turns up at the first workshop, so the MIT is divided into 2 separate teams to check out the other 2 locations. In the meantime, using a burner phone, Ryan informs his OCG mates that they are on their way. The AC-12 surveillance team captures Ryan's illegal action. Soon afterwards, 2 OCG members show up at one of the workshops, and they're killed by authorized firearms officers deployed by Steve. We saw one of these OCG members back in episode 2. He dropped a burner phone for Joe after she was released from jail. Joe promptly arrives at the scene and takes over from Steve because the workshop is related to Gail Vella's murder, and that is Joe's investigation. This whole thing was a 10-minute sequence and I thought it was well done. Maybe it wasn't as action-packed as the van chase from episode 4, but it made me quite jittery. The tension was palpable, and it was a well-thought-out plan by Kate to make sure that no evidence would be destroyed. So I really enjoyed this part. Steve, Ted, and Kate come together for a debrief session, and Chloe says they're ready to bring in Ryan, but Ted wants the bigger fish because he's been burned before by getting ahead of himself. He knows Ryan won't give them anything if they bring him in, so he wants Ryan to lead them to the 4th man, H, the person who's been pulling the strings all along. Ted is making this risky decision because he knows he's running out of time. He will be forced to retire in less than a month because of Chief Constable Philip Osborne's new strategy. Osborne is cutting 90% of anti-corruption's budget, and he's merging all units into one single unit. Osborne even throws the Police and Crime Commissioner Rohan Sinvani under the bus. Osborne says to the media that politicians are affecting real police work. I did say in my previous video that Rohan didn't seem okay with all of this, and turns out he wasn't, and that costs him his job. Rohan has to retire because he's lost support from the top brass. In theory, he could replace Osborne, but whoever he replaces him with wouldn't like Rohan because he removed the Chief Constable. Rohan would get a bad rep among cops by removing Osborne, so he can't win. That's why he bids farewell. Before Rohan goes away, he has one last meeting with Ted and says, quote, "It's down to you now, Ted, in whatever time you've got left," end quote. That's why Ted doesn't bring in Ryan. He doesn't have time to keep catching small fish. He has to go for the bigger one because this is his last chance. Time to talk about the least impressive part of the episode now, Kate suddenly turning into a Muppet. It is a real shame what they've done to her character because she used to be my favorite until this season, but now she's just uncharacteristically naive. She doesn't think Joe is bent even after she learns about her relation to Tommy Hunter, and despite the fact that Joe shut down her Ryan inquiry in the last episode. This is not the Kate we know and love, so earlier in the season I thought, oh, she must be undercover, she must be trying to gain Joe's trust, but that doesn't appear to be the case anymore. They've simply made Kate choose her emotions over her investigative and suspecting nature. I get that she likes Joe, but come on. The Kate we know wouldn't give this much leeway to anybody, let alone the daughter of a former OCG leader. It just doesn't make any sense. In this episode, Kate tells Joe that she informed AC-12 about the workshops, and Joe wants Kate to request a transfer. Kate doesn't accept. Joe then talks to her OCG handler, and he or she wants Joe to get rid of Kate. Joe accepts as long as it's the last thing she does for the OCG. The handler responds, definitely, but it is misspelled, which is something we've seen before in Season 5. John Corbett's OCG team were communicating with H, and H misspelled the word definitely. Then AC-12 gained access to this message board, and Ted pretended to be H, and interestingly, Ted also misspelled the word definitely. He argued that he did this intentionally because he studied the earlier messages. Coming back to this episode, I think the person behind this definitely message is either Chief Constable Philip Osborne or Detective Chief Superintendent Patricia Carmichael, who will head the new anti-corruption unit. I say that because they're the ones who call off the surveillance on Joe and Ryan just before they ambush Kate. So Osborne or Carmichael gives the order via the message board, and they call off the surveillance to make sure Kate gets taken care of. Talking of which, Kate shouldn't have been there to meet Joe in the first place, even if she trusted the surveillance team. Joe sends Kate a dodgy address to meet, and Kate goes there no questions asked. The Kate I know would have simply checked Google Maps or whatever, and she would have realized something was up, because it's a dodgy meeting place. But she doesn't do that. She goes to the meeting place and texts the address to Steve when she finds out that the surveillance team has been called off. Ryan and Kate have a good old Mexican standoff, and 2 shots are fired as the episode comes to a close. That was a cruel ending, wasn't it? How are you gonna leave us hanging like that, wondering if something happened to Kate? Not cool, mate, not cool. But I've had time to think about this, and I don't believe there's any way Kate is dead. I think the real mystery is who shot Ryan, Joe or Kate. Maybe Joe had a gun and she couldn't let Ryan go ahead with it, so she shot him. I think that remains a possibility, but it was probably Kate that shot him. AC-12 are on their way to the scene, and Kate shouldn't be in any trouble whatsoever, even with Carmichael getting involved, because Ryan's workshopped gun should be enough to prove that this was a justified shooting. On the other hand, it looks like this is the end of the road for Joe, because she lured in Kate to this location. There's a text message proving that. I don't think Joe can weasel her way out of this. She will probably be interviewed by Carmichael because she has taken over AC-12. Ted might still be present, but Carmichael is in charge. But here's the thing, for some reason I don't think Carmichael is bent, even though I absolutely hate her. I know this might not make much sense, but it's just a gut feeling I have. I even think that she will eventually come around and help AC-12 take down who I think is the real culprit, the Chief Constable. To explain the reasoning behind that theory, we have to look at the Lawrence Christopher case, because Osborne's name comes up there as well. Jimmy Lakewell told Gail Vella to look into this case, and he also shared this information with Steve. The details of this case, which we learned from Chloe, and the name of the victim makes it clear that Lawrence Christopher is a mix of Christopher Alder and Stephen Lawrence. The former died under police custody because of gross misconduct, while the latter was the victim of a racially motivated attack, and the police messed up the investigation. Lawrence Christopher, the fictional character on Line of Duty, combines those 2 real-world cases. Lawrence was the victim of a racially motivated attack in 2003, and he died under police custody. The police messed up this case on purpose because one of the men that attacked Lawrence was the son of Tommy Hunter. The senior investigating officer on this case was Marcus Thurwell, but he has retired since then and he doesn't even live in the UK, so he wouldn't have had a motive to get Gail Vella killed. This is where Philip Osborne and Ian Buckles come into play. They were both part of Thurwell's team during the Lawrence Christopher investigation, so Tommy Hunter could have ordered Thurwell and Osborne to sabotage the investigation because his son was one of the perps. It would be terrible for Osborne if Gail Vella discovered this OCG connection. That's why Jimmy Lakewell told Vella that the truth has got to be something pretty bad if you're willing to go along with the insinuation that you're a bunch of racists. Right now it looks like Thurwell and Osborne were willing to be called racists in order to help Tommy's son. Vella discovered this OCG link, and Osborne, aka the fourth man or H, had her killed. My hope is that Ted shares these findings with Carmichael as she plays nice and helps them investigate Osborn. I'm probably being too naive here because I'm putting my faith in friggin' Carmichael of all people, but I think she will eventually show that she is a good cop. Turmoil, on the other hand, is the opposite of a good cop. He's as bent as they come. On top of the Lawrence Christopher case we've already mentioned, Turmoil also looked into the death of a social worker, Oliver Stevens Lloyd, who tried to report the abuse at the Myuu boys' home. And even though it looked like Oliver could have been murdered, Turmoil wrote it off as suicide. So that's two major investigations which were intentionally botched by Turmoil: the Lawrence Christopher case to help Tommy Hunter's son, and the social worker's murder investigation to cover up the abuse at the Myuu boys' home. In my opinion, Turmoil has gone over to the dark side entirely and he's running the criminal operations of the OCG. He's not the fourth man or H, he is the new Tommy Hunter, I suppose. He deals with the criminal side of things. I think the fourth man is Philip Osborn. He is the big baddie that AC-12 have to nick. Last but not least, Steve learns that the money he found in Steph Corbett's attic was the other half of the $100K Ted received from the OCG under false pretenses. Steve also learns why Ted gave this money to Steph. As you might remember, John Corbett thought Ted was bent, so he tortured Ted's wife. Then, in order to exact revenge, Ted talked to Lee Banks, an OCG member, and told him that John Corbett was an undercover officer. This eventually led to John's death and Ted felt guilty, which is why he gave money to Steph. However, Steve hasn't done anything with this information yet. Well, what an episode that was. I felt like we were bombarded with too much information at times, and I also didn't appreciate how naive Kate was, but other than that, I enjoyed it a lot. The workshop raid sequence was brilliant. Carmichael coming back was a nice touch. The ending was somewhat frustrating in a good way because it was extremely exciting but unresolved at the same time. Well, what did you think about episode 5 and what are your theories? Leave your comments down below, like this video if you've enjoyed this breakdown, and subscribe for more movie reviews and TV show breakdowns. That's it for now, take care and see you in the next video.